It's Friday night or Saturday morning, wherever you are in the world. We're here with the Mythic Dungeon Invitational Asia Pacific region. Last week, of course, was China. Now we're back with more from the East, and defending world champions will be on display this weekend. I am your host, Healing Stat, and joining me on the desk once again, we do have Sloot and Jack. Now, gentlemen, we saw a fantastic performance coming out of China last weekend, speaking testament to how the Mythic Dungeon Invitational has grown. Now we're back with the defending world champions, Sloot.
Not just the defending world champions, but the top two from last time. So really excited to see what they can do, but also just to see what all the regions can do. You know, we have everything in line. Last year, if I'm not mistaken, we had, you know, some people doing their quarters in MOF Souls and some doing in DHT. This time we can compare all the teams together. So I'm really looking forward to collecting some stats right now.
Without a doubt, and like you said, having the defending world champions here, and also kind of just showing the growth of the tournament itself, where we're seeing, you know, not only are we having to actually have those high-level dungeons completed to get into the tournament, but also having the time trials and really, like you said, having the extra stats, where you're able to see the preparation of teams going into it.
It's been such a great tournament so far. I mean, like you say, the preparation is bigger than ever before, I think. Like the China region last year, maybe a little bit disappointing considering how big of a region it is, but they really did step it up. We saw Skyline D and Sunsky coming out on top of that one. They'll be going forward to our global finals later in June. And I mean, hey, these teams really have stepped it up this year.
I mean, they certainly have. And, you know, although it's not always fully indicative of how the actual MDI is, the time trials, I think, were an excellent step forward to really show, you know, the caliber of the teams and how serious teams are taking it now that they're seeing that the MDI is here to stay and here to go in the future, too. So, you know, I mean, it's anyone's game at this point. China stepped it up a lot, and, you know, we're going to see what APAC can produce. Yeah,
we had thousands of teams competing in the Proving Grounds. Of course, some of those qualified to the time trials, and now we have our top 32 teams, or well, we even threw some out last weekend, so we got our top, what is it, like 26 teams now, but we are ready to go to Asia Pacific. We can have a little look over at that bracket right now. Of course, remember, this does kind of include not only Australia and like ANZ, that type of region, we also have teams from Korea here, and that's actually going to be indicative of our first game. MARSY, the defending world champions of the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, will be going up against Team BTS, who are a Korean team coming in at number 8 for the region. Then later on, we will have Team Substitute versus Gulch Trotters, Psy versus Guren Mul, another Korean team, and then Free Pumps versus Pure Luck. But I do want to home in on this first match. We have MARSY starting us off, Jack, and they are, I mean, well, it doesn't really get better than them. They have like the Mythic Dungeon Invitational under wraps from last year.
That's right. Like you said, on lockdown, and they're bringing 4 of their previous 5 members back onto the squad. So there always, you know, there only is one replacement. It just goes, you know, when you have that team synergy, and you know, usually we don't see APAC as the region that's really pushing lots and lots of keys. But when it comes to speed runs, I mean, we've seen second to none.
Yep, and I mean, last year we were talking all about Europe, all about North America. I think this year we're also kind of guilty about talking about Europe. That'll be next weekend. But I mean, all the regions really have been stepping it up, and you can see why. We've got double the prize pool on offer for the entire program this year. That's going to be starting off with this weekend, where there's 25,000 on offer. You can see to the side of your screen right now, 6,000 for the first place team, and then 4,000 for second. Those are the big two, and of course, they will also be granting birth into that global finals, which will be played live here on the stage in Columbus, Ohio, courtesy of Blizzard. Free flight, free drinks, free everything. Sounds pretty good to me.
I can't complain with that. It's a lot of ho-hos you can buy with that kind of money. But I mean, it should be good. And you know what I like about the kind of the bit of funding as well towards the regionals is that it does add that extra incentive to get that top seed in each of the regionals for the globals. Something that we kind of saw teams maybe in the last MDS strategically try to avoid. You know, they wanted to get that second seed to try and face whoever it may be at the globals, but now there's that extra incentive to fight for the top.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really important as well, that the teams won't know who they're going up against in the global finals. Obviously, you want to be the #1 seed for the extra pride, the extra money, and of course, like the opportunity to play against the second seed in the global finals as well, which will be played live here. So I do want to talk a little bit about the overall format. Of course, we have a weekend per region. We saw China last weekend, Asia Pacific coming up now, or APAC as it's otherwise known, and then we'll be heading over to Europe next weekend and North America on slightly more friendly hours for our Western viewers. But one of the things we have to talk about, of course, is the way that we are locking in the comps, and of course the affixes as well, Jack.
That's right, and you were seeing, of course, as you have to have the start of every series, you're locking in your composition for that best of 3, and the loser, of course, is going to be picking not only the next dungeon, but they're going to be adding on to the 3rd affix to it. So each dungeon, previously the last MDI, we had, you know, a little rotation of the affix that we'd be having, but this time around, each dungeon already has 2 affixes, and the 3rd one gets picked by the losing team.
Yeah, and the affixes was something we saw that was quite interesting. We saw a couple of counter affixes coming out depending on what those compositions were, but we do have the map pool, and one of the things that we have been doing this year is we've been actually scaling up a little bit. So you can see our first map once again will be More of Souls. That's going to be something that we see as a theme throughout the weekends of the regional finals, and we will be starting on a 22 salute.
Yeah, I mean, 22s is, not the most dangerous difficulty in the world as we see on live, but, Adrian, as we know, of course, we're going 23, 24, but at the end of the day, this is a race. I mean, they could be doing a 15 for all we care. The bottom line is which team is really going to finish this first, and it just kind of adds pressure from each team. They push each other to make sure that there's a little fire under your butt, and it's, you want to get riskier and riskier and come out on top.
Yeah, and I mean, that was something that I want to throw to you as well, because last weekend we saw some really interesting compositions coming out, and as you say, you do have to lock in that composition at the start of the series.
Yeah, so it's really important to note, of course, if you're just tuning in this week, from now on, once you lock in your class composition for the 3-part series, that's it. You can change specs, of course, during it. Let's say you take a shaman, you can go elemental, rest, or whatever you want between the games, but what they pick, that you're stuck with it for the 3, so it's really important to, maybe go sometimes with more of a comfort pick as well, because you don't know what map your opponent's going to end up choosing with that affix combo.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something we saw last weekend. Like, one of the big teams that did kind of make use of this, and they were an underdog team, was that no healer roster from China. They were the team that, I mean, they came in, I think, at number 6 seed from the time trials. They weren't necessarily expected to do anything, but they did shake it up a little bit with, like, honestly, that no healer roster.
Right, and that was one of the biggest things that they kind of played to their strengths whenever they could. But they said, if we win this first game, we know that we're going to be able to get into the favorable position for that third game, right? We're probably not going to be able to win, our second game because we're going to get hard countered by our opponents there. If they're going to be picking something that's going to be especially dangerous, require a ton of extra healing. But when you're able to get that third pick there, when you're able to, seal out the game, it really worked out very well until they started going into the higher level dungeons, and it started getting much harder because they didn't really have, the diversity. They weren't their single comp, their comfort pick wasn't really able to handle the full length of the tournament.
And that's what we were saying earlier, a composition like that really needed to win that first game. They relied heavily on being able to play the maps that they practiced, and that kind of counter pick that we were talking about just so easily counters a 4 DPS comp. You had some bursting, some Grievous on there, and that's all it takes.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that we've talked about for the Mythic Dungeon Invitational this year. Last year, maybe a little bit more simple. We had the single elimination. Now we've got double the series. We've got double the prize money. And the format is even more challenging for the teams. You have to be good not only on the slightly more simple 22s, but then obviously as we scale it up to the 23s and the 24s, you have to be able to be fast, but you also have to be successful when it comes to these dungeons. And that's definitely something we saw from Skyline D last weekend. But I want to home in a little bit on this weekend, of course. We've got MARSY, who are the defending world champions, not only defending champions coming out of ANZ for this one, and they're going to be playing up first against the Korean side, Team BTS. Now, MARSY, like we said, Jack, they were the 4 of the 5 that made it last year. Do you expect them to go? I mean, they came in at number 1 for this region.
That's right, and it shows, when they're having the same, group, when they're having the same team that's going over and over and over again through these dungeons, practicing together. You really want to see them start making that statement there, where we see, they got their number 1 seed, and while they weren't, posting super high scores, for example, on the worldwide time trials, you really want to start seeing them actually start proving themselves as they're going into this tournament tonight.
I also just want to know, how does MARSY keep getting in trouble, and why do they need to be freed again? That's the most important question.
That's not only that, but also Pumps, as we see later in the tournament, is also locked up, so much freedom coming up here.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these teams do play, and we had the Sky last time, now we have the Freedom, but we are ready to dive into Game 1. More of Souls will be the map, of course, something that I think we'll see the teams plundering into the depths of Hellia's grasp. We'll have to see how they can come out on top. We saw some interesting times last time around, some big pulls on the boat, something to watch out for. But this is the first game of APAC region, Asia Pacific. MARSY, the defending world champions, looking to defend their title.
Jack, we're back at the More of Souls once again. The thing is, you're not going to say this a lot, but at the end of the day, we're going to see that it's going to be about this first pull right with the boss right away with Emerald. So we're going to see both teams doing that, seeing if they execute it well, and of course, how many deaths they can, they might be able to pull it off, but are they getting any deaths in the meantime? We do see now, of course, we are tracking this beautiful Bloodlust timer on the screen. We have seen that it's popped on both teams as well. We can see that glowing effect indicating that Bloodlust is active on both sides.
That's right, and the affixes, of course, what you see in this dungeon are on your screen right there. This Fortified, Quaking, and Bursting that we're going to be dealing with. It's very, very important as you're getting into this first pull. We saw a lot of times out of the Korean teams just showing great control with how well to deal with a lot of these these mobs of varying health pools, being able to kind of balance it out. But you also have the the ability with having both Holy Paladins just to deal with the bursting so easily.
Of course, we see the Blood DK over on Free MARSY side using that Agrimar trinket with that 20 mil somewhat absorb on that first Dark Slash from Imran. Of course, that is extremely dangerous for the tank, as we know, Jack. Now, some of the other notables to include on this first boss is that AoE fear that we've just seen. You do have to, players do have to run out of that purple circle. Make sure you don't get feared, and eventually, of course, the boss will summon these skeletons from those Bane ads. But Jack, there's also that kind of that pushback, of course, from the Frost Winds that do a fair bit of damage to the group.
That's right. You see the Winds of the North as they're coming out, just putting a big knockback, and it also can kind of split your team apart as, of course, any of the purple circles that you just swirl around the room. He does have an Arise Fallen that turns them into a bunch of skeletons that spawn, and it's very important to note that they cannot be stunned, they cannot be slowed, they're just going to be rushing after you, and it's very important as the tank to be watching out for those Dark Slashes in conjunction.
Now, speaking of tank, Jack, I will have to take just a moment here to say that we have finally seen our first team from Team BTS here not running a Blood DK for once. We are actually having a Vengeance Demon Hunter, which, of course, is a very popular pick on live servers. Lots of utility that comes out of them, including their, a 6 to 8 second silence, of course, on a 1 minute CD. They can disorient with their fear as well. Tons of AoE damage coming in. We can see some of the damage differential between the two tanks on that first pull. Nonetheless, both teams at killing Imran at the exact same time, coming downstairs to that inner boat area and getting ready for one of the more dangerous pulls from the boat here.
That's right. When you're in, bursting, and especially with Quake, and when you're in such tight areas, especially when we're seeing, having more melee heavy comps, you see the double melee comp coming in here with the Windwalker Monk and the Havoc Demon Hunter. Having the extra cleave damage coming in from the Quaking, you're of course having any of the barrels that are going all around the room. Zeray's popping wings there with Virtue, just making sure you get everybody topped off as rapidly as possible, because that damage can really start ramping up, especially as you're seeing all these mobs dying around the same time. Very important to watch out for any of the refreshes of the bursting stacks that you're seeing. So it's a lot of times, when you keep on refreshing over and over and over again, right there trying to deal with the Quaking and the last bit of bursting, just deals so much damage.
Yeah, a fair bit of damage coming out, and right you are. There is a lot of damage coming in these tight spaces. Of course, we have the barrels to watch out for as well, the Defiant Strike too, and these Swift Blades are particularly menacing to the tank. We did see Brath, of course, the Blood DK here, drop substantially in health. One of the spikes there has already procced that Purgatory with their very Sinister Strike, which of course is a massive shadow hit on the tank. Now, these Shroud Hounds you have to be careful with as well. They will eventually leap to their furthest target, doing a fair bit of cleave damage at that area, so it's important that whoever's out there, usually the Holy Paladin in this case, is fairly durable and can survive those hits. Now, Jack, we're no stranger to the Mariner coming up, probably the most dangerous mob by far in this entire instance. Most teams do opt to, of course, skip this pull. They will, as we can see, pull the Groundwalker and the Mariner to the side as the rest of the team safely goes upstairs.
Yeah, usually what we'll see on live servers, a lot of times the tank will be in charge of taking care of that, but there you were seeing Aerie the Hunter actually popping his Turtle, Skystep Potion, going into the far right side, making sure he's able to feign death and avoid all the rest of the ads and the mob aggro. That way he's able to meet up with the team. So fantastic pick, having the extra utility out of that Hunter. They're skipping the death, they're skipping the time for the extra res, they're going right into these champions here and just setting themselves up great for Harboron.
If these champions, we do have to make sure, of course, you interrupt that AoE fear, otherwise, well, of course, everyone will get feared. Now, you can outrange that ability, and as a healer, then dispel anybody who was unlucky enough to, unfortunately, get feared should they miss their kick, but no problem coming for them. In the meantime, of course, Team BTS just now working their way up to Harboron. They're actually slightly ahead at this point of Free MARSY. So, with Harboron now, there's a fair bit of damage going on. I know you're concerned about the healer, but nobody really cares. No, I'm just kidding. But, of course, coming in, there are 3 main abilities to watch out for in this fight. First of all, we do have that Cosmic Scythe that does a ton of damage, a huge linear frontal attack. Then we, of course, have ads that stun a player and get summoned from them. And then lastly, we have that main ad that does need to be interrupted, otherwise they pulse a huge amount of magic damage. In the meantime, of course, there's a ton of aerial denial from that nether rip.
That's right, and well, let me tell you, Sloop, I'm very happy to see healers on both sides of the teams here right now.
For now.
As both teams are, like you said, starting up with Harboron, very close together in percentage. They're having to deal with the Servant that will have his AoE nuke cast that needs to be interrupted. And of course, Harboron will stun one player, cast a fragment, spawning 4 small ads popping out of it. 4 copies, clones of the player that need to be destroyed as quickly as possible. So be able to have everything tightly jammed in together. And it's really nice when you see the double melee comps where you're able to actually get on top of these ads very rapidly, get them stunned, keep them all tightly packed together, and just nuke them very quickly.
Yeah, so, there's a very small difference between these two teams right now. Now, I will say that, of course, Team BTS actually reached Harboron slightly before Team MARSY, but MARSY is actually pulling slightly ahead on that single target damage right now. And most importantly, with how tight the timing is on this map and how quick it is, we already do have a team over on a death, on Team BTS right now, and that 5 seconds can be a pretty big deal at the end, Jack.
It's a very big deal, and a lot of the ways that it's kind of coming out is having to deal with, like, if you're looking at the healer damage, for example, almost doubling the damage. Zeray's here, almost doubling the damage of Team BS's Holy Paladin. And while you're seeing, pretty close together overall for the rest of the DPSers, that you're really seeing, like you're saying, that Vengeance Demon Hunter pumping out that extra damage and being very, very valuable there.
Yeah, the Vengeance Demon Hunter definitely pulling slightly above that Blood DK in the meantime. And of course, we also do see that that Boomkin over on Team BTS side. We, of course, know Nagura's backstage going crazy right now, hoping that they succeed in the end. Harboron going down sub 10% right now for Free MARSY. Team BTS following suit right after they actually close that gap on the single target. Of course, after this boss, we will expect to see a massive, almost full boat pull from both teams coming up, ready to weather that storm.
That's right, and you're seeing there, they're pulling Harboron right into that corner, getting the Sky Step potion coming out of there by Brath, making sure he's able to run right on top of all of those mobs right as they're coming out of the boat. An absolutely big pull that we've seen already from the Chinese.
Yeah, so this pull will often make or break. Of course, we're in that fortified setting. It will often make or break. There's tons of interrupts that need to go out here, not only from the champions, which of course cannot be silenced or aim interrupted, so you'd have to single target interrupt them. We'd have the torrents that need to be interrupted. There's swift blades in here. There's defiant strikes in here. Players have to be really careful. We do see the DK, of course, taking a bit of a step back, making sure that not too much damage is coming up, while in the meantime, Team BTS just now doing the pull here. Of course, that Sigil of Silence from the Vengeance Demon Hunter here will actually be very useful in favor of Team BTS.
That's right, and you're just seeing how rapidly Free MARSY was able to actually decimate those mobs. You were seeing the Paladin, for example, still having his wings. He had just had his Devotion Aura pop just at the very tail end to deal with any of the lingering damage from the bursting stack. So just phenomenal performance there by Team Free MARSY, being able to get everything grouped up together and just fantastic trash percentage.
Yeah, MARSY, we do have a death over on MARSY's side. Of course, the Holy Paladin does go down. They do well not to use their battle res, as you can release at the checkpoint from Harboron. He releases immediately, will pony up and get back on to the group right now. Skjarl should be falling soon for Team MARSY. Whilst in the meantime, Team BTS still slowly working on that. We do have the tank go down just now in the end, and another death, unfortunately, for Team BTS. They're kind of scrambling to get back together. Luckily, the mobs are low enough that they should be able to kind of finish them off here, but everybody's quite low. The tank just does get back in action, barely hanging on at 25% right now, getting healed up a bit by the healer, whilst in the meantime, Free MARSY, of course, still working to finish Skjarl off.
Yeah, and before Team BTS has even actually pulled Skjarl, you're seeing they're still working on this trash pack, and like you were saying, it's very make or break whether they're actually going to be able to deal with it. And the bursting stacks are going off, people are just dropping so low, more deaths being added to the timer here, and just it gets a lot sloppier there. They had that similar execution all the way up to this instance, but that one pull is just really sinking them here.
Right, you are, Jack. Team BTS, of course, just capsizing there. Unfortunately, in the meantime, they're going to pull Skjarl as well, while in the meantime, Free MARSY is taking Skjarl to Skjarl as we speak. Now, they do have to kill all of the trash percentage in the meantime in order for that fog wall, to go down, which they now have done, in order to have access to the final boss, Helia. The DPS are sitting upstairs just to finish off some of those skeletons, while, of course, we start the RP to summon Helia at the base of the ship.
That's right, taking care of the skeletons. I love it. Of course, getting down there, dealing with the rest of the RP there, waiting for the, of course, knockback. With Helia, you do have to be dealing with the Destructor Tentacles and the Grasping Tentacles, killing, I believe, 8 of them, of course, before you're actually able to get rid of them. Oh, sorry, 6 of the Tentacles before you're going to be able to actually move on to the boss fight. So again, first pull, first set of Tentacles coming out here, you're so easily able to cleave all of them down. The hitbox of them is very, very huge, so just completely decimating them here. And of course, moving on to these, you do want to watch out, and very nice positioning as you're seeing by Team Free MARSY. Just sticking to the sides of the ship. It's very important because there will be tentacles spawning occasionally, poking holes through the vessel and knocking any kind of players back or stunning them, dealing tons of damage. So most of the safest spots are going to be near the edges of the ship.
Indeed, you don't want to be poked by one of those tentacles coming up in the meantime. And of course, these Destructor Tentacles actually are particularly dangerous. They do need to be tanked, and they do spawn in random parts of the ship after you kill the first one 30 seconds later. So you want to make sure you're not by yourself and you're nearby the tank, because you might just get meleeed and punted into one of the holes in the meantime. That could be an easy one-shot. In the meantime, the Free MARSY is finishing up the last of their tentacles, while Team BTS has fallen substantially behind with that big important pull. They kind of failed to do it not nearly as clean as Free MARSY, and now they're only starting Helia in the meantime. So they're going to have to hope for a miracle for Free MARSY, the defending champs here, to kind of mess up, have a wipe in order for them to catch up. But I mean, in a non-tyrannical setting, it's going to be tough for them to do. And of course, we do have Bloodlust coming up in 40 seconds.
That's right, but Bloodlust is just about to come back up. It's amazing to see how quickly they're getting through this dungeon compared to some of the, as you see the China region just previously. Free MARSY already engaging with the boss, and Team BTS hasn't killed any tentacles. They're actually about to get their very first tentacle down.
Right, you are, Free MARSY. Now, of course, the second part of Helia here, Jack, we do need to discuss. We do have kind of a dual phase thing going on where you have 1 minute of DPS time where Helia will choose 1/3 of the ship and breathe, as we're seeing right here on Free MARSY's side as she does. Of course, we'll still have the same healer dispels to do with those debuffs. And lastly, we have to make sure that we interrupt her. It requires a 2-man interrupt rotation, assuming you're a melee, of course, with that 15-second interrupt timer to make sure that there's not a huge amount of damage on the group. After that 1 minute, of course, we just see they pop Bloodlust. After that 1 minute, she will actually submerge for about 20 seconds, and players will not have access to DPS her. So they're trying. The goal here really is the dream that we saw last time too, is to try and down her in one phase. Now, of course, you don't need to get her to 0%. You just need to get her to 70.5.
And they're doing a fantastic job here at 75%. Like you said, they did hit Bloodlust immediately as it came up, so it really shows that kind of confidence that they're going to be able to take care of it. So they will have some lingering Bloodlust duration, of course, if she does go submerge. I believe they're very, very, very close to it. I think there might be this last breath before she does submerge, so they're trying to get it as rapidly as possible, and it does look like the submerge is going to come out. Yeah,
unfortunately, they will have to wait it out, whilst in the meantime, Team BTS just now starting their second phase. Free MARSY basically being out of commission for about 20 seconds now until hotaya resurfaces, and they can resume damage on her of about 2% and a bit to go before she will fall. While in the meantime, BTS, even if BTS does a one phase on her here, I don't think it'll be enough to free MARSY, to finish free MARSY, of course.
It will not be enough to freeze MARSY's advance here, as they are at 72%. The submerge has ended here, as you're seeing, and they just need to get down to 70%. Fantastic time coming out of free MARSY here, and I believe this is actually going to be a global record.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that is indeed. I think our record last week was with Team CBA, of course, with 12:28 on the clock for Ma. So they healthily beat that timer and are starting the series 1-0 now.
Which I think was well-deserved there from Free MARSY, who did come out on point with that one. And I mean, hey, that was Seed 1 versus Seed 8. That was like literally as opposite as it can be, right? Like that was what you'd expect to be a completely one-sided game, but we saw both the teams getting to that last boss with honestly very, very quick times. I would have even expected Team BTS to maybe rival that first time as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was close. It all just fell apart right at that last pull, after Harbor On. That's really where it fell apart for BTS, unfortunately. And they were just, their damage output was just not nearly as much as Free MARSY. It kind of forced them on the defensive. The Vengeance Demon Hunter had to start backpedaling, backing up, slowly kiting, and eventually you're just going to run out of gas, out of CDs, out of interrupts, whatever it may be for that pull. And we saw it. They started suffering with some of those deaths as well. Eventually they got it down, but it took way too long and they cost them way too many deaths.
That's right. One of the things I think we really have seen from both teams is the healer damage coming out, the very huge disparity that we're constantly being able to see there, where Free MARSY's healer was just constantly having action there to be able to get those mobs down. And you even saw as well when they had that big pull like you were talking about right before Skjal, the healer was just spending as much time as possible DPSing for the first 5 or 6 seconds, and it only was when they got out of any of the stuns, got any of all the group-wide interrupts, that they really had to start pumping out a lot of healing. When you're in that position as a healer for Team BTS, everything starts falling apart because you have to deal with so many of the debuffs, so much damage in a very tightly enclosed space.
Yeah, it really was the boat that kind of separated these teams. It was very interesting to see that for the first boss, at least, like they basically killed it at the exact same time. We were talking about whether it was going to be that one death that would separate the two, but it was in the end the boat pull, which has been a theme throughout, like how many mobs can they pull and how quickly can they kill them. But of course, we talked a little bit about the compositions. Our first Vengeance Demon Hunter coming out there in that game. We also saw a Moonkin coming out, so a few different classes coming out. I'm sure Nagura is sitting in the back somewhere looking at these Koreans being like, ooh, interesting compositions. But they are now locked to those compositions, so it's only the map and the affix that these guys get to change up soon.
I get to talk about tanks finally. This is exciting because we're getting, it's just so much Blood DK representation. So I'm really thrilled to see the Vengeance Demon Hunter here, and they provide their own advantages, of course, with some of the utility, the AoE silence, like I mentioned, especially in the upper levels of the boat for a lot of the casting mobs. And we did, Jack, as we mentioned a few times, a lot of extra damage coming in from that Vengeance Demon Hunter. But there is something to be sacrificed and something to be said about the lack of AoE grip and some of that self-sustain that DK just kind of powers through. You just can't match that DK self-sustain. In the end, definitely can't blame that loss on, necessarily the Vengeance Demon Hunter versus Blood DK, especially in this dungeon where there's such dangerous trash and a lot of it isn't grippable in the first place. You're already in confined spaces too, but definitely excited to see how this will affect their map pick coming up as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they have got that. Of course, they do have completely different compositions here, and it will be the map choice from Team BTS when we return. But Free MARSY, apologies, the winner of last year's MDI. They were the 2017 Global Champions, have a good first game here. That's in the books. Now they're looking to secure the series with one more victory on the next map. We'll be right back with the Asia Pacific Regionals after this. Welcome back. We had an almost perfect run coming out of MARSY, certainly the fastest time we've seen on the Mythic Dungeon Invitational thus far. I am your host, Healing Stat for the weekend. Joining me on the desk, we of course have Slood and Jack for this series. Now, gentlemen, of course, this was a fantastic first game, but I also want to commend the opposition team, Team BTS. They had a great one, of course. It's Korea versus Australia, basically, in this first game, and it was a close first game.
I mean, it was close, and just as we discussed kind of prior to that break, it's really one pull that just set the two teams apart. Something that can certainly spiral out of control in some other longer dungeons, but I mean, they held it together. It was really close. There's just kind of that misstep in execution at the end that cost them the game, but let's see if that counter pick is going to help them out. Yeah,
and we do have the counter pick in. It's going to be heading over to Darkheart Thicket. This is, of course, the map choice coming out of Team BTS, having lost that last one, and they also get to choose the third affix in this new format. They've gone with Bursting, meaning that the overall key is going to be a 22 with Tyrannical, Explosive, and Bursting. How do you think that plays into the Vengeance Demon Hunter's hands and just their composition overall?
Well, one of the things I want to kind of see is just how that Vengeance Demon Hunter is going to be taking advantage of the extra damage that they think they're going to be able to deal over, of course, the DK. Some of the pulls where they're going to be able to, not have quite as an advantage, like we were talking about with the Bloody K grip, self-sustainability. So being able to just kind of be nuking these ads down just a little bit faster. And that was one of the things, like you're talking about, the execution for those very large pulls we saw in Moss Holes wasn't quite there. So it's something they definitely need to be changing for the next round.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And I mean, there's been a few other things that's been interesting to see. We've got Bloodlust timers now, which is something that I think you guys were providing us the feedback you wanted to see. Also, if you're looking somewhere up there on your screen, there should be a little cog wheel. Be sure to click it because it's going to show you a little bit of real-time updating information about not only the characters, but also their gear and their talent choices, which is something that I think is very interesting for you guys as well. You were saying that it's very nice to see how they're min-maxing with their legendaries when they're running around, for example.
I mean, yeah, just legendaries, but I mean trinkets too, just kind of keeping an eye on everything. And if I'm not mistaken, that add-on, that extension, actually updates no more than once every minute, if I'm not mistaken. So you actually can keep well in touch at home with kind of how they're swapping on a per boss or per pack basis as well, just to see the kind of gear, legendaries, trinkets that they want to assign in the meantime.
Yeah, and I want to give huge credit to the guys behind the scene who really have been working tirelessly throughout the week because, I mean, hey, we're just here, we're the pretty faces, quote unquote, who have been working on the desk. I mean, you guys know something as well, I guess, which is pretty useful. But I mean, it's great to provide this extra information for you, and we appreciate the feedback where it comes in as well. But we're 1-0 in this series, MARSY, defending world champions, ready to look to win this first series cleanly. We are ready to dive into game. It's going to be Darkheart Thicket for this second map, and of course, the thick of it is where you want to be for this one. There's a bunch of puns. You guys are going to be having such a joy, such a relaxing time. Jack and Sloot, take it away.
We really weren't beating around the bush there, Adrian.
Oh, Jack, please. Time to start the thick hit. In the meantime, now, it's going to be interesting to see because we did see some teams last week that kind of opted to skip a lot of this first trash and then pull some of the keeper packs instead, or deal with a lot of this kind of cat owl pack at the beginning in the meantime, then opt to skip later. And Vengeance Demon Hunter will have some advantage, of course, with that silence in the Shade of Xavius log. But at the beginning, we do see, of course, a very typical first larger pull coming out of MARSY, a huge Diplo on the Hunter as well. They get that, was that an LOH or a bot? Nonetheless, we do have, unfortunately, that debuff Forbearance for 30 seconds, no more application. They do go down in the end. Now, these cats are so dangerous, Jack, because they do leap out to their furthest target and do a ton of damage.
Cats, bears, birds, oh my, air going down very early. Going down once more. So much damage coming out of those leaping cats, dealing so much damage. Team BTS isn't faring much better, already having 2 more deaths along with it. Full team wipe there for Team BTS as their tank is going down.
Yeah, I mean, those cats just swiping the Hunter out of the air, if I'm not mistaken. Team BTS in the meantime, of course, having...
skipping ahead.
Yeah, they're skipping ahead indeed. So, I mean, they will have that 3 deaths, but luckily it will boost them to a more favorable, presumably, position in the meantime. Now, Team MARSY, of course, having 2 deaths on the board for that pat and not having that pull ahead in the meantime, while BTS is, of course, jumping down to this larger open area where it's very dangerous because it's very easy to accidentally tag some extra packs, especially with that notorious Star Bolt from that Boomkin in the meantime. So they have to be very careful, making sure not to aggro anything. But in the meantime, Team BTS actually opts to wait for a favorable time on the pat, get a root from the Boomkin, and actually just power ahead on towards the double bear pack, which will come right after this patrol in the meantime. I actually think they're pilling the bears with it, so a fairly sizable pull here in the meantime.
Yeah, it's very surprising actually to see them going after the double bears after skipping, of course, a lot of the cats and having to deal with all of those. You are seeing, of course, the Disorient coming out of there. Another DPS going down for Team BTS. They're getting the monk up very quickly, actually using one of their first battle rests there, making sure they're able to get this pull completed. And a lot of times, because they did run ahead, die, skip ahead, get the healer to res them. They are kind of all in on this. They need to kill this boss to activate the first checkpoint.
Absolutely, Jack. Indeed. MARSY in the meantime working on the patrol. That Team BTS opted to skip. Now, Couple dips here in health, nothing too dangerous, of course, once the cats do leap on that monk in the meantime, and they will be moving ahead here. Now, part of what makes some of this early trash so dangerous is not only the cats, of course, that, you know, will jump on far targets, but you also have to interrupt that star shower, because if you get hit by one of those swirlies, you're probably dead in this situation. And of course, Jack, we have to dispel from the poisoner. And lastly, maybe most importantly, is that if you miss that interrupt on those owls, you do get disoriented, which we actually saw led to a death over on Team BTS.
That's right. As you're seeing, of course, the disorient dealing quite a bit of damage, so both the Windwalker Monk and the Paladin for Team BTS did get hit by it. Paladin instantly pops bubble. That way he's able to, you know, recover, get himself top back off. Again, seeing another skip here. Air doing a lot of the heavy lifting there, making sure they're getting the skips ahead. You know, popping turtle, running ahead of everybody, using feign death. That way the bears are then going to be able to reset. It's a lot easier if you're able to just get that quick percentage, get quick percentage later on, rather than spending time on the beefy bears.
Right, you are. They're barely squeezed by there. In the meantime, both teams are now on Archdruid, excuse me, Gladialis. Is it Glade? It is Glade. I was saying
Gladialis.
Gladialis. No, it's Gladialis, Jack. Come on. Now, of course, we do have to mention that we are in that tyrannical setting, so the bosses are particularly dangerous on this boss. Some of the notable mechanics to watch out for, of course, are that for every 2 cat forms, he will transform into a bear form, punt the tank, do a huge frontal, and then charge towards that target. And also, most importantly for you, Jack, is that leap in cat form out to its furthest target, applying that Grievous debuff.
That's right. You're seeing, of course, the mirror Holy Paladins there, standing out as the furthest target, making sure that they are, of course, able to, you know, soak up, you know, the leap that comes out every single time. You deals quite a bit of damage. Really helps, of course, being able to have the Holy Paladin being able to be covered in plate. You'll also be using Devotion Aura, so by standing by yourself, you're going to be taking 20% less damage, in addition to all the other damage reduction from your plate armor, easily being able to top yourself off. You're seeing, you might even see, you know, if the Paladins are trying to do as best as they can, trying to jump in a little bit, maybe drop a Consecration and come right out, but usually just filtering all their Holy Shocks, if possible, into the boss. That way they're going to be just using flashlights, and you're seeing, of course, the Tears Deliverance coming down there by free MARSY's Holy Paladin in Zerace. That way he's able to keep on focusing his single target healing into himself with Flash Shield, and then keep putting a little bit extra damage in with the shocks onto the boss.
Now, notable is that Team BTS actually pulled the Dryad from the trash beyond Gladialis' room with them to allow them to kind of get some effective and efficient cleave on them in the meantime. But of course, they will have to watch out for those extra explosive orbs, making sure that they don't suffer any extra damage. But nonetheless, smart move by them, allowing them to kind of hopefully power ahead in the meantime after this boss. Gladialis, in the meantime, going down lower in favor of Team Free MARSY, which we did see had the stronger single target. But we do have a death go down over on Free MARSY's side in the meantime. Now, this is kind of a questionable situation. You know, they don't have their battle res to use, unfortunately, in the meantime, so they're going to have to 4-man 20% of this boss, 1/5 of the boss's health, while in the meantime, Team BTS matching their percent and pushing beyond.
That's right, and that's one of the, you know, worst situations you can really get into is when you have, you know, a sizable amount of the boss's health to really take down, and you're not able to actually get a battle res out, and you're stuck there just 4-manning it, losing out a ton of damage. So, of course, they actually did have, you know, very good showing where they're able to actually get another DPS down, but they're very, very close. They just need to make sure they play cleanly. Holy Pally getting himself top back off, you know, getting your distance here from any of the little nightmare spawns that are coming up. They will be able to release, and again, the checkpoint, the first and only checkpoint for this instance is right here.
Yeah, there's just lose so much time there with those 2 DPS deaths, not to mention an extra 10 seconds on the clock because of those 2 deaths. Team BTS in the meantime, now because they skipped so much of that first trash as we were discussing, 2 teams with 2 different strats here, they do have to deal with these keeper packs. Of course, the pain in the butt here for the keepers is that they have that aura that heals these blossoms intensely. I believe it's 5% per second, something like that. So you do have to kind of kill the keepers first and then deal with the rest of the trash after, which is a huge time to them. In the meantime, teams will often try to pull the blossoms to the next pack after dealing with the keeper in order to maintain efficiency, but you can't pull too much, of course, in that explosive setting, because then you have to babysit those orbs for way too long.
That's right, and then you're seeing there, they're just having that total tunnel vision there for Team BTS, making sure they're getting the keeper down. That way they're going to be able to deal with, of course, the little dryads and the rest of the flowers. Don't really have to worry about that. There is, of course, as they're going into the house here, there is, of course, a lot of the little flowers around back. Grabbing all the flowers, that way you're able to just get everything together, nuke it all down. But like you said, you need to get everything together very quickly, which is not necessarily Team BTS's strong suit with a Vengeance Demon Hunter. That way they're able to deal with the explosives a lot more easily.
Right, they do cross-pollinate between the 2 packs there. In the meantime, of course, Free MARSY pulling, actually they end up pulling the same pull in the meantime. I'm not sure if they messed that up on, or if it was on purpose in the meantime, pulling that pack. But Team BTS dealing with, of course, that house strat, trying to LOS that Dryad that will oftentimes run away from the tank. Of course, they don't have that blood DK to immediately grip it back, so they do opt to kind of LOS behind the house, and now they're getting ready for the double keeper pull, which a lot of teams often skip. and just kind of run past. But in the meantime, it looks like they will be DPSing it down. Both keepers coming in here will have to deal with those ones first.
That's one of the nice things about this is you are able to, of course, pull those keepers without the flowers. You know, some things that you've seen other teams have done in the past is just getting all the keepers together, taking care of the keepers first, then getting all the flowers together. That way you're not going to be able to have any kind of synergistic issues or with the keepers just healing them constantly. So any kind of cleave damage you do on the flowers would be wasted in that period. So like what they're doing here, making sure they're able to get the flowers isolated, then they'll be able to get the flowers with the pet patrol, which is going to be the 2 flowers and the dryad.
Yep, and not having to deal with so many explosives in the meantime, which of course is a DPS loss as well. So they do pick up the 2 flowers, as we can see the Vengeance Demon Hunter using that superior mobility over their Blood DK brethren in this case, able to Infernal Strike all the way over, getting a Glaive Toss on that pack as soon as the rest of the remaining 2 Blossoms join them, turning it into a 5-pack in the meantime, prior to pulling those GUIs. In the meantime, Free MARSY still chewing through the same trash right now, but I believe they did skip that double keeper pull. I didn't see for sure, Jack, so you're going to have to back me up on that one. Team BTS now actually dealing with the GUIs. I don't know why we always call them GUIs, but they're GUIs nonetheless, dealing with the GUIs plus actually the Blossoms and the Dry. There's going to be a lot of damage coming in here. Now, these Dwellers are particularly dangerous mobs because you do need to constantly interrupt their Tormenting Eye, which is a dot on a target, a channel dot, and if the entire cast goes off, will actually fear and nuke that target for 5 seconds.
So you're seeing Sigil Silence there coming down for Team BTS's Vengeance Demon Hunter, getting everything in packed together, following it up, of course, with that Solar Beam. So very, very important to be able to make sure everything's, you know, tightly come together, being able to deal with the explosives there, and making it a lot easier to get those GUIs, like you said, interrupted and focused down.
We have had Last Resort proc, of course, on that Vengeance Demon Hunter, similar to a Purgatory cheat death for the Blood DK for those at home. Will not be available again for several minutes. Oakheart now coming up. Now, Jack, we didn't appreciate too much yet that these bosses are in a tyrannical setting, and there's a couple of bosses in here that do a fair bit of damage. Oakheart being one of them, of course. Shade of Xavius will get there in the meantime. Dressaron is nothing to scoff at either, but Oakheart does have that huge AoE stomp that deals a substantial amount of damage to the group every 30 seconds.
That's right, and it's one of the nice things with the Holy Paladin, making sure you're getting everybody tightly in packed together, and even wearing full plate armor. Again, you're seeing just the Paladin just taking a huge chunk of damage. But it's very important to be able to, you know, make sure everyone's topped off, make sure everyone's prepared, having, you know, taking advantage of, say, for example, the Paladin's Devotion Aura. That way they're able to actually, say, get that extra damage reduction across the board for everybody, not having to split up the 20% between anybody else when Aura Mastery is active. You are seeing, you know, pretty close time, actually extremely close timers here by both teams.
Yeah, big chunk of damage coming in on that Vengeance Demon Hunter. There's a lot of damage that will rock the tank on this boss. Crushing Grip, the one you're seeing right now, will be held every 30 seconds on the tank, and then he will throw it to one of the allies, of course, performing a bit of AoE damage around them. Tank will need heavy CDs, of course. In the meantime, we see the same thing from Oakheart. Slightly falling behind for Free MARSY in the meantime. Of course, not too substantial of a difference. We also have that Nightmare Breath that goes on Oakheart's primary target. The tank will need to turn that away in the meantime. And Jack, of course, we also have those roots that spawn the flowers in the meantime, which teams can deal with in one of 2 ways. One is to allow the roots to kind of live, to allow multi-daughters to get some extra single target damage in, or oftentimes you will kind of get the freedom from the Paladin, so you want to clear the roots as to not have to deal with those explosives for too long.
That's right, and you've been seeing both teams, for example, just taking care of the roots, making sure that they're able to deal with them very easily. Team BTS is, as you said, the freedom coming out there. But you're also seeing, you know, the ability for to deal with, say, the ground stomps, where you're able to have, for example, Arrowhead in way off the screen there, outranging, of course, the stomp and outranging any of the little roots that are coming out. You do have to watch out for the throw that comes out from Oakheart, because he will still try to throw it out to the Hunter or to another DPS. So if you're in that situation, you want to be able to move up as the Hunter and then start running all the way back. That way you're not going to have to accidentally start moving the boss or, you know, closing in that range, because then you will eventually just run out of space to be able to outrange easily.
Right, you are. Huge chunking damage coming in on the Vengeance Demon Hunter on Team BTS. In the meantime, of course, we do see that freedom from the Holy Paladin as he horsey backpedals into that last one, making sure that he procs the roots ready for destruction by the team. In the meantime, Oakheart matched on percentage on both sides right now. Pretty similar death counts too as well. Free MARSY actually at a disadvantage right now with 1 extra death on the board. Both teams have used one of their battle reses as well. In the meantime, Oakheart about to go down for both sides here, and no deaths to speak of, pretty clean, but this is a boss that really takes a while. You really got to chew through that damage.
That's right, and one of the biggest things we want to see constantly with a lot of these teams is their consistency. How well they're going to be able to constantly execute, you know, staying in that groove where they're making sure they're able to get everything down. And you're seeing, for example, the Hunter moved up that way when the throw came out, he was able to just be right underneath the boss, not, you know, harming any of the other DPS, because they are running, like I said, that double melee comp. They don't want to, you know, make sure any time is wasted. So Free MARSY is a little slightly behind Team BTS, but it's still anybody's game at this point.
I mean, I guarantee it'll be a close match between them at the end anyways. Moving forward, of course, we do have the small GUIs that are, they make quick work of them, but you don't want to survive survive too long. Of course, too many orbs will spawn, and most importantly, these blood-tainted Furies. Now, with these, there's a bit of a trick here, Jack. You do want to pull these off to the side, and once the larger elemental dies, it will split into 4 lesser Blood Fury elementals. Those don't give any percent. They cast, they're dangerous. You might as well just get them out of the way, and you'll see that teams will opt to stun or slow the large mob and get away from it as quickly as possible just as it dies so that they can skip the split.
That's right, and just avoiding, we've seen this a lot of times where there's other specific mobs or mobs that spawn from other mobs that are not going to be giving any extra percent, doing what they can to be able to avoid those, skip past them. You're seeing the Hammer of Justice there coming out from the Holy Paladin that are moving away from it as it's about to die. That last Solar Wrath coming out from the Druid. The Elementals spawn, they're getting away from them, they're able to just look back, double check, make sure it's taken care of, and here they're actually waiting for the next patrol from that other Blood Fury elemental. They'll get the root on it, and then they'll be able to skip ahead to Dresseron.
Now, there's a lot of bursting damage going on, of course, with these slimes because there's just so many of them. There's 9 or 10 per pack, so the healers really need to kind of prepare for either that huge burst damage, or the teams will kind of have to slow their damage down, make sure that they don't carry the stacks over, as we're seeing that bursting ramp up on the targets right now. Not very good there. They actually refreshed barely at that very last second. A lot of damage coming in. We do have a death going down, so not very well handled, ironically, as we're just talking about handling that properly. In the meantime, they move on to Dresseron's room as Free MARSY is already staring the dragon down.
That's right, and you wouldn't think we've seen a lot of times is taking advantage of those failure detected pylons that were just put out there just to make sure that they're able to get the res out. And both teams are having those deaths leading up to Dresseron, so they are actually, I believe the failure detection pylon actually was not working there for Team BTS's Boomkin, so they do have to actually spend the extra time to be able to hard res him. Usually you'll see how these teams just be able to drop the pylon, and then they're able to get them up very quickly at basically 1% or 0.1% HP. But both teams are here. Free MARSY is getting a little bit of an advantage at engaging with Dresseron first.
Now we do see Free MARSY, of course, often pull these whelplings in, which teams often do. In the meantime, a strategy that allows for some of that AoE damage to be translated into single target damage for some different DPS and tanks, might add, on that note. Now, the danger here, of course, is you do have to not only deal with the whelplings that don't do too much damage to the tank, but for every whelpling spawn, there's an increased chance of getting that extra explosive spawned in the meantime. Dresseron, of course, a bit lower for Free MARSY, as you mentioned, Jack. They did pull ahead of time, but there are a couple of things to note here. There's a breath on the tank that the tank must avoid, and then 2 other notable mechanics is that cave-in that is targeted on a player, so when you know it's coming, you can actually bait it away from the boss, and he should do so in order to well position for this third ability that does a ton of damage to the group.
Well, those are well positioned indeed. You are seeing Dresseron just taking so much damage here from the Demon Hunter for Team BTS, where you're able to actually pull all those extra mobs. The extra single target damage that you're actually able to deal out can be quite substantial here, and it's quite a challenge a lot of times when you are having to deal with the pushback into the cave-in like we were talking about, because you are having that ticking damage constantly going out, and you have to make sure you're getting everybody topped off enough, that way you're going to be able to deal with the cave-in immediately afterwards. And it can be quite a challenge as a Holy Pally, because you're not going to be as mobile, so you'll be relying on that Beacon of Virtue, getting those quick flash you'll cast off. As you're seeing, I love what Zerace is doing. He's fighting against the knockback as rapidly as he can for the first half of the pushback. Then he's just sitting there casting, letting the winds take him, getting all the flash shields that he needs off, topping people off enough. That way he's able to have everybody at full HP. Cave-in happens, then he has a little bit of time to work with to be able to get everybody else healed up.
So it is important to note, excuse me, it is important to note, of course, that on that pushback, the further you are from the center of the boss, the faster away you will be pushed. So this is why you see the players positioning under the boss, and why it's so important to bait that cave-in away from the boss so they can quickly position right in that hitbox afterwards. And as you said, Jack, have time to get some casts in, especially for the DPS and the healers in the meantime. Big spike damage coming in from Dresseron on Team MARSY, of course, with that cave-in, which inevitably does AoE damage to the entire group, but if you stand within that area denial, it will take for extra damage. Dresseron now being moved across towards the exit, but of course across to some whelp eggs in the meantime.
Yeah, but one of the nice things is you're seeing this pushback going out. One of the really nice things when you're able to be taking a blood decay is you're able to have consumption popped while the knockback's going out, while you're having all these whelps going out, so the extra cleave, the extra AoE damage that inevitably will go on, providing a little bit of extra breathing room for the healer there. And as you're seeing, Free MARSY is taking down Dresseron as Team BTS is actually caught up quite a bit.
Caught up quite a bit and actually surpassed now. They will be jumping down into Shade of Xavius's log. Now, once you log in here, you cannot get back out. Unless you die, of course, and then you will have to be released at the Glade Alice checkpoint. Now, down here, actually, there will be a bit of an advantage from a utility perspective on Free MARSY, as they will be able to kind of AoE silence these most dangerous casters, the summoners, and of course, the imps casting that Dread Inferno, which is very dangerous, an area denial and explosion that will force players to move out. So you want to make sure those all are locked down in the meantime.
Yeah, but you're seeing the summoners, of course, and you're dealing with the extra imps in the meantime. There will be a curse that does go out. That'll be slowing down players and be affecting their haste. So it's very important to be able to dispel that if you're able to. Unfortunately, as a paladin, you don't have a dispel to use, but you can use Hand of Freedom to be able to remove it, because part of the curse is that snare. So Hand of Freedom is able to deal with that.
So Team BTS actually ahead on trash at this point, I believe. They still have the pack to clean up. That Free MARSY doesn't. So Team BTS is probably rearing up for a skip on the last trash pack, the 5-6 pack, which is particularly dangerous, right before Shade of Xavius, whereas I believe Free MARSY will likely have to deal with all of it, if I'm not mistaken, to get their 100%. Of course, both teams will then progress to Shade of Xavius. A lot of damage coming in on the Free MARSY group here in the meantime as they clean up the rest of this trash. You can see that dangerous group we're talking about ominously staring at them from the distance at the end of the log.
Yeah, but it's very important, as you're seeing these Bloodseekers are coming out to get the constant dispels onto the tank. There is that big dot. One of the things when you're comparing like Druid or Paladin for this instance is that, both are able to deal with the poisons that are going out frequently, but the Paladin is able to get the diseases dispelled, whereas they are still able to deal with the curse that the Druid can also dispel by using Hand of Freedom. So again, you're seeing 93% here for Free MARSY, making sure that they're not going to be, ending any of the instance with maybe 90%, 80% or some other arbitrary number short of 100.
We unfortunately did see that last week, but it looks like Free MARSY has this well calculated. In the meantime, they should just be hitting about 100%, while Team BTS is rearing to likely skip this pack. Of course, they don't have access to a Rogue's Mass Stealth here, so they will be using that. The big AoE fear, of course, from the Vengeance Demon Hunter, which does displace the mobs. Now they need to be careful immediately to LOS that orb that spawns, because the mobs do get put in kind of temporary combat in the meantime. So they go around the side in the meantime. Of course, the Vengeance Demon Hunter will need to sacrifice themselves in this circumstance, get that 5 seconds, get the res up, and then they'll be pulling Shade of Xavius. While in the meantime, Free MARSY struggling to keep the rest of the group up with those bursting stacks, but does well to do so.
And you're seeing these constant feasts that are going out, the very small fish feasts, these sugar-crusted fish feasts are such an easy way. The fish fry just makes it so easy to be able to top everybody off and get mana back. So you're going to see those constantly going down throughout the rest of this tournament. And Free MARSY here, you're getting a slight advantage, getting actually about the same time, almost
exact same time pull. Both teams 6 deaths on the board. It all comes down to this, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have to see who executes Shade of Xavius faster on a tyrannical setting, who has immense one-shot capabilities on some of these players. So there's going to be tons of damage going out, tons of spells going out, tons of healing to do, a lot of mechanics that the players have to deal with. Of course, there's that Nightmare Bolt, which spawns that pacification circle under the player for 20 seconds, as you see in the meantime. And of course, Jack, you're no stranger. There are a lot of damage that you have to heal through. Of course, there's a channel as well as a dot that needs to be dispelled.
I love the confidence here coming out as a race. He pops Holy Avenger, he pops Avenging Wrath, and just goes right into the boss. He's dealing as much damage as possible into his opener here. And it really kind of speaks to his confidence that he's going to be able to deal with a lot of the damage that we've been talking about here. When you're able to make sure you're dealing with the feed on the weak, that will be that constant channeling tick, as you're seeing is pulsing into Brath right now at Bloody K. You're going to be able to deal with the constant damage from that. You're going to be able to deal with, for example, the Nightmare Bolt that does come out. Growing Paranoia, just need to make sure you're providing as much space as possible for the Paranoia affected player. And you are seeing, as you're seeing there, the air is standing as far out as possible to make sure that he's able to outrange a lot of the mechanics you really have to deal with.
So at the 50% mark, of course, we'll hit that kind of second phase, which replicates the first phase a lot of the time. Does come with a huge AoE nuke. And in the meantime, the players, of course, will be seeing huge swirlies falling around the arena. And if any of them connect with the boss, it will buff Shade of Xavius by 5%. We do have a death come over on Zerace. Immediate battle res goes up. Another one should be coming up for them shortly, should they need it. But that's an extra 5 seconds on the clock. So some of that advantage they gained with that massive burst from Zerace, the Holy Paladin. Another death going down on Aero Monk. They will have a battle res accessible to them in just a few seconds. But in the meantime, Team BTS slowly catching up and negating a lot of that burst damage that came in from Zerace at the beginning of the match. Of course, you see Manila playing it really safe. No damage up, barely any damage up on the board. Just making sure all the players are nice and healthy.
Yeah, but you're seeing that's one of the things that we need to see. They already have that 2-death cushion there for Team BTS here. As it's getting so low there for the Warlock, he was able to pop his Hellstone, make sure he's getting himself completely topped off before he was getting annihilated there. It was just so close to be able to deal with. But like I said, Team BTS has a 10-second cushion to be able to deal with. And a lot of times as a healer, especially if you're like pushing keys on live, you have to be weighing how safe, how aggressive that you want to be able to play here. Wings just now coming back for Zerace. He's going to be able to focus a lot of it into that single target damage here, but he also is able to have it up for when Arrow is dealing with a feat on the weak, and that's one of the risks that you have to take with Paladin, is you have these cooldowns that are not only HPS increases, but DPS increases, and you have to judge how aggressively you want to play and how confident you are going to be able to deal with them.
I mean, this is an absolute nightmare right now for Free MARSY. They are still slightly ahead, about 2 to 3% on the boss, but they have a 10-second deficit that they need to overcome because of those 2 deaths. Unfortunately, Team BTS playing it nice and slow, and you know what? In this case, Jack's slow and steady might actually end up winning the race. We'll have to see here in just a moment, as Free MARSY is opting to pass that finish line in just a moment by downing Shade of Xavius. 2% left for them, and Team BTS will have 10 seconds left to kill Shade of Xavius, which looks like they should be able, without shade of a doubt, to finish up in just a moment and tie the series at 1 apiece.
What a race. What a race. Both those teams, they had 6 deaths coming in. They pulled the boss at the exact same time. It looked like Free MARSY was winning that one with Xavius, but then he threw some shade over to them, got a couple of kills for himself, and Team BTS actually end up winning that one on their map choice. Crazy, crazy stuff. And I mean, that just speaks testament to this team. They didn't give up. They had the map. They had, I don't know if we've had a closer race than that, like last week at all.
Not in this tournament at all, that's for sure. I mean, that was really close. I mean, great performance from both teams right there. And, you know, it just, like you said, you know, it's a map that it was their pick. It was their counter pick for the map, their counter pick for the affix. And it's just something that they practiced to death. And, you know, Jack, you know, a bit of confusion at the beginning. Oh, what are they doing? Did they wipe? But no, it was all intended. They wanted to skip that pack. And it was really interesting to see both teams, you know, we were talking about the strats that often come out of DHT from the Dark Heart Thicket for these teams that we constantly see, you know, performing on live servers here at the tournaments. You either pull the cats, pull the bears at the start. Some teams opt to skip, and both teams just had such a different approach at the beginning, but ended up in such a similar position at the end in terms of time.
It really was incredible to see, you know, the different preparation that you're seeing from those teams, and that's one of the nicest things about the tournament is you are able to see, even though these dungeons, you know, Dark Heart Thicket was one of the first dungeons to come out with the Legion expansion. You are seeing just different strategies, different approaches to actually get both very, very strong times here.
Yeah, and I was really excited to see it because not only was it different strategies, it was actually a strategy that benefited the Demon Hunter tank. Like we saw that they skipped some of the more conventional packs like the cats, which are challenging at the start. We saw a few deaths even for Free MARSY from them, but they were able to use that Demon Hunter to pull, honestly, one of the biggest pulls I've seen before that second boss ever, I think, on this fight.
Yeah, usually teams opt to not pull the Dwellers or the GUIs like all together. I mean, that's for sure. Especially because in an explosive map, it's just such a concern that you have to babysit the orbs for too long. And while you may do it successfully, it still detracts a lot of damage on those dangerous mobs that the Dwellers, of course, if they get that channel out, they get a huge nuke on you, they get a fear in as well. And that Sigil of Silence just does such huge work on that pack in the meantime.
Yeah, well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Career strategies coming out on top in game number 2. We're tied 1-1 here. The defending world champions, Free MARSY, unable to secure the series 2-0. Of course, they will have the map and affix choice going into game 3. Advantage still for them, but they were too slow to free Malfury, and Turando will be most displeased with their performance in that map. We'll have to see if they can win game 3 or if this is going to be an all-Korean affair in the first series of the day. we're tied 1 apiece here in the first series of the day. Asia Pacific definitely got a show to put on for us. I am your host, Healingstat, joined by Slood and Jack. And I mean, hey, that was some real Korean strategies coming out in that one. We've got the double range composition, we've got the Vengeance Demon Hunter. What have you thought about this composition thus far?
I mean, it's working out great for them. Clearly practiced, a lot with it. They're comfortable with it. They're comfortable for the entire series with it. And I'm just curious to see how it pushes forward. They're definitely using the advantages of that Vengeance Demon Hunter on that last map, with that Sigil of Silence, whatever utility they can get out of it, that extra bit of AoE damage as well. But, it could bite them later on. I mean, there's a lot of maps that have a lot of advantages for that AoE grip, which we'll have to see if they manage to bust out for free MARSY.
Yeah, and I mean, we were talking a little bit in the break about this double range composition and how it actually makes it a little bit safer for the healer, but we didn't see the healer on BTS going more aggressive in this one, Jack.
That's right, and that was actually kind of one of the things that really saved them for Team BTS, was that they didn't play that aggressively when they got into Xavius, but we constantly see on the scene where Zerace was playing extremely aggressive with his cooldowns, because like I said, with Holy Paladin, you're having Holy Avenger, you're having Avenging Wrath, where they're dealing extra damage and extra healing that you're able to pump out with it, and he just used all of it with aggressive damage, and I believe what happened was he had to actually use his bubble, his Divine Shield early to be able to survive some of the big damage coming out from Xavius, so he didn't actually have it for the transition, so he just got utterly obliterated by that. Then when you have, I believe it was Arrow the Monk, who had actually been dealing with the feat on the week, he went down because there wasn't enough healing. He didn't have any, Zerace didn't have any throughput abilities to actually keep him topped off, so it really was that extra 2-death deficit that even though they killed it right about the same time, Team BTS did pull it out because of those extra 2 deaths.
Yeah, it came back to bite them in the butt. I think it's fair to say free MARSY too slow to free Malfurion in that one, but we are now going to game 3. We can have a little look over at that map choice. Of course, advantage world champions in this one. As we go into game 3, we'll be heading to Neltharion's lair, and the third affix choice from them is going to be that Volcanic Sloot.
Yeah, it's funny, I just mentioned a map that really plays to that kind of grip potential and grip benefit from DKs, especially, we're all thinking about it right now, the Pelters, right? The Pelters, I mean, just having that AoE grip right at the start, getting them in, getting that stun, getting as much damage as possible. You're in a 2-Pelter pack, one of the Pelters leaps, you grip it over to the other side, so nice advantage coming here, at least from a tanking perspective, for this dungeon pick in the meantime.
Yep, gripping stuff in this first series. It is tied 1-1, and it's been close series, but we are ready to dive into game. Do not layer down your swords in this next one. We have, honestly, like either team can win this. Team BTS, I'm almost speechless, because last week we had Skyline D, the #1 seed, who were absolutely dominant. They destroyed the #8 team from China, but we're over to Asia Pacific, we're over to the defending world champions region, and they've just been looking so good. Both these sides, Free MARSY versus Team BTS, game 3 to decide the series.
Adrian, you may be speechless, but you certainly are not punless here. Free MARSY versus Team BTS, deciding the series here on Nelt's Lair.
So typically, Jack, of course, we see a huge mass sweep pull here with about 30-31% of the dungeon's trash. Where we see the Sky Step, of course, we see that right away on Free MARSY. They're going to pull all the Skitters. They're going to pull the Scorpion as well. They're going to pull the Worms. They're going to pull the Giants. Now, the Giants are the most dangerous, of course, here, at least for the tank. They do that frontal punt, and then you need to displace or disorient them after, or else they will do that huge frontal magic damage with a 10-second dot debuff, which is quite nasty on the tank in the meantime. Big pull coming here. There's that beautiful AoE grip in the meantime. Gets that AoE stun down and does as much damage as possible. In the meantime, though, not very far behind is Team BTS.
Team BTS also doing an excellent job being able to get all of those mobs in there together. You are seeing, of course, having to deal with the Lurkers. Lurkers can be such a pain to actually have to deal with, because they will burrow, they will appear at another location. So even when you're having that grip advantage, and it actually might even speak more to the grip advantage when they're saying that even though they're going to burrow, they're going to get away, the DK still has an option to be able to get one of them back every single time.
Right, Gerard, they burrow an idea from each other, but it is important to note as well that once those worms burrow, they actually target one of the players. So as long as the players are kind of, stacked together near the rest of the mobs, they shouldn't get too far away within range of cleave. Of course, we do see that we've already had Last Resort proc on that Vengeance Demon Hunter. They do well, both teams, of course, in the meantime, while they're finishing up those last trash mobs, that somebody goes downstairs and starts that RP on Rockmore, the very first boss, as it does take a bit for him to spawn.
Yeah, but you're seeing there both teams actually getting all the little mobs that were right at the bridge, getting those down before the boss. We did see Skyline D, for example, leveraging those extra mobs to their advantage when they did go through this instance. That way they're able to have the double Shuriken Storms to be able to top off. So it's interesting seeing how these two teams are actually taking it on. And you are seeing Team BTS's Holy Paladin there in Manila playing a lot more aggressively there, using his wings off the pull just to make sure he's pumping out the extra damage. But he is a far second way
no
to the race.
comparison to Zerace right now. Zerace doubling his damage, almost topping the burst damage right now. Tons of damage coming in for Free MARSY from from the healer right now. Sound the alarm switch, chat. So tons of damage coming in. Rockmore going, but they're actually matching damage for damage in terms of single target output on Rockmore right now. Team BTS did slightly start ahead, and they're very slightly ahead on Rockmore, but now Free MARSY starting to show their single target prowess with a rock solid strat in the meantime, making sure that they get Rockmore down first so they can head down that river right now. Jack, notables, of course, on this boss. You are noticing, of course, there are those skitters running around in the meantime. The more of those up when Rockmore does the huge smash that you've just seen on both screens, the harder that smash will hit. So it's important for players to cleave those down and make sure not too many are up in the meantime. Of course, Rockmore does have that frontal cone that you want to make sure you avoid. And when those skitters die, Jack, it does leave that pool of poop on the ground that you want to make sure not to step in.
That's right, and you're making sure that as you're seeing the Paladin there, just doing great job on both sides, make sure they're getting on top of the skitters as rapidly as possible. Holy Paladin is just so well suited to be able to deal with these, taking advantage of Crusader strikes, shocks, judgments, to be able to hit them very, very rapidly, getting them stuck in place, getting Hammer Justice off to get a quick Sephu's proc and dealing even more damage there. So as you're seeing it, really nice to be able to see, for example, for Suffer on Team BTS, being able to get a lot of those little skitters into that corner there. That way they're going to be dropping off the excrement away from everybody else, not really harming any of the melee, because they do deal quite a bit of burst damage right before, of course, the ground pound.
Team BTS, of course, actually wrapping Rockmore up first. They were percent for percent before Team BTS finishing in the meantime and going down that lazy river ride in the barrels in the meantime, and Free MARSY just now finishing and getting ready to have a barrel of fun as well as they head down into this very, very open space that we're going to see leading up to the second boss, Ularog. Now, important here is that there's a ton of trash you can pull, but teams often opt to hug that right side and then do one really big pull on top of that first pelter pack.
Yeah, but you're seeing here as Team BTS, they are opting to just, like you said, hug that right side, make sure they're skipping the first breaker, watching for the patrols, getting everybody in together before they actually do start this very, very large pull. And this will be the big test to be able to see how quickly and easily they're going to be able to get everything in together. I really like how they are skipping that second breaker, because it is such a pain to be able to have aggro on him, dragging him all that way and trying to get him up and with the rest of the group. So they are opting instead to pull the Hulk and pull some of the mobs onto the right side there, getting everything in tight together, because that is a more enclosed area that you have to deal with right off the bat. So I love what they're doing there.
Yep, so big pull and a lot of pain over there from that Vengeance Demon Hunter in the meantime, opting to use Sigil of Chains that he spec'd into as kind of an AoE grip, not usually as effective as the Blood DK counterpart, but you do see it coming out there, grouping all of the mobs together, and then the tank will often kite away, as we're seeing both teams do at the moment, because if the primary target of the breakers and, of course, of the pelters is out of range, they will not do their avalanche for the breakers, and the pelters will not hit the random targets with their disc. But we do see a death go down over from the Vengeance Demon Hunter on Team BTS right now. Immediate res comes up as he gets back into range of that giant.
It's a very, very scary scenario. Like you were talking about, as long as they're not in range of their primary target, they will not pelt, they will not earthquake, or avalanche, apologies. So it's very important to make sure your tank stays alive for that. So dealing with, of course, having to deal with the Hulk there, if you're not getting any displacement, if you're not getting any grips, stun, or whatever, you are getting that full frontal out of the cone from the Hulk there. So you're bringing down the tank as he's trying to kite and not be able to have any kind of mitigation there. Very quick battle res coming out, but they won't have another for another 5 minutes.
We say this all the time. I mean, that is one death on the board, 5 seconds, and with how close. I mean, it was death differential that caused the loss for Free MARSY last map. So already, there's a little pressure with that death coming in from BTS. Both teams now moving up over to the last area filled with mobs right before the boss. You'll see Ularog menacingly sitting up there. Of course, Jack, here, typically a quite large pull to this room. Once again, full of shapers, full of the giant, one giant, of course, full of breakers and pelters as well. Now, these shapers are also particularly dangerous to the pack as well, because they will cast Stone Bolt at random targets. We're in a fortified setting, and those do a lot of damage. So there needs to be consistent, well-planned out interrupts for the group. But importantly here, they have a huge advantage for Team BTS, because not only do they have Solar Beam, which a bit questionable on the side there as to why they used it instead of on one of the shapers, but also they have that Sigil of Silence for the shapers too.
I like what they actually came out with the Solar Beam. They made sure they got the first kick on the shaper with the Solar Beam. That way it's going to be more easily dragged into the rest of the patrol, and that way the melee can take over for the rest of the kicks going out there. So it was a nice way to be able to kind of bring everything in, but it is a big loss when you're losing out, especially when you have a slow coming out, you're losing out on that huge duration of silence.
My concern there is that they pulled 2 shapers. That beam could have been used to silence 2 shapers instead of 1. They could have had the Vengeance Demon Hunter with their ranged kick at the start do that instead of one of the closed shapers. Nonetheless, the pull seems to be going well. Of course, you cannot slow that giant. We see that punt come in on Sulwan DH, the Vengeance Demon Hunter, over 14 BTS. A lot of frontal damage else if they don't get displaced in the meantime. Dealing with the giant prior to getting up, the Hulk here, of course, prior to getting up and getting ready to pull that second boss in the meantime. And, Free MARSY as well. 2 deaths on the board. Things aren't going so swimmingly for them. Make that 3 deaths now. A bit of sloppy play from our returning champs.
it is a lot more sloppy play, and it also should be noted that this is going to be their pick. This is their counter pick. This is the one that they think they are very, very confident on. And at this point, there is that two-death deficit coming up here. That was what sunk them in the last game.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. 3 deaths on that pull. The room is clear now for both teams. There still is that Shaper on the side with the Geode, of course, for Team BTS. Some teams often opt to just skip that completely. The problem is you do run a bit of the risk, of course, during the down phase, the guess the ball under the cup phase with ␐Ularog here, that the one you might need to DPS might spawn a bit too close to that Shaper, and you might need to pull them. Of course, some teams opt to not pull them on purpose so that they can cleave them during that second phase effectively. In the meantime, we'll have to see, of course, ␐Ularog lending a hand to the team there, making sure that you don't want to get hit by those hands, else you do a ton of damage. Huge spike comes in on the tank as well. And lastly, Jack, of course, these idols, these totems that are summoned by the boss, both in the first phase and, of course, in this phase too, doing a ton of splash damage onto the group as the cave-ins happen.
That's right, Team BTS starting in that intermission phase, while Free MARSY is starting with ␐Ularog, making sure that Free MARSY is, again, not catching those hands like you were mentioning there. And again, we have that little intermission period that we're able to, again, choose the totem that he is hiding in. We are also noting, like you said, they have to really watch their positioning because they do have that Geode, they do have the Shaper that they have to watch out for. But I believe it would also still offer a little opportunity to get a little Sephu's proc if they're able to keep a banish on any of the Shaper, onto the Geode there, because it is an elemental.
Right, Charlie, pretty well pre-planned usually for these teams to try to keep some of that trash relevant on the side. Once you guess the correct totem, or ball under the cup in this case, of course, which I never do, ␐Ularog pops back up for a first phase, and only once it reaches that 100% energy level again will he go back down. So the dream usually for teams is, of course, to only have one of those phases. Inevitably, the boss starts with around, if I'm not mistaken, 50 or 60 energy, something like that. So he actually goes down for his first transition phase a lot faster than the usual phase 1 cycle. But we are in a 22 right now. The chances of them finishing it before the next cycle is pretty slim. They might be able to pull it off. We'll see in a moment here, Team BTS working at it, as, of course, Free MARSY just resurfaces.
Yep, and you're seeing there, just trying to make sure they're able to get that catch-up as best as they possibly can. The Warlock was, of course, refreshing his banish out on that Geode, making sure he's getting that extra Sephu's proc, getting his dots up, refreshed, and everything like that right before, again, that phase comes out. Always important to, kind of watch out for that positioning there. Would have liked to, and again, this is the same thing that we've been seeing, is that, Manila's trying to deal a little bit more extra damage, but, a huge amount of his Holy Avenger there was just kind of wasted, where he really wasn't, dealing as much damage by any stretch as the race was. And this is one of the things, if they want to make sure they're extending their lead, extending this snowball, ahead of the other team, as you're seeing Free MARSY is catching up quite a bit. You want to make sure that you're doing every little bit you can to help out.
Yeah, not to mention the trash percentage was something we'll have to keep an eye on, of course. Free MARSY 17% ahead of Team BTS in the meantime. ␐Ularog now resurfacing for Team BTS. They should be able to easily finish him off here prior to moving on to the next, prior to him, of course, going down for one more phase. ␐Ularog entering his final guess the ball under the cup phase for Free MARSY while they're dealing with that. Team BTS now finishing off ␐Ularog and moving forward. Now, because of their kind of lower percentage, I would assume that they're going to pull some of those crocodiles in the side. There are 4 of them on the side there. It is important to note that these are crocodiles, not alligators, as crocodiles you'll see in a while, but alligators you'll tend to see later, Jack.
That's right. I'm ready to see them.
I'll take over, Jack. So while they are pulling indeed the basilisks on the side here, there are 4 of them. You can see the Vengeance Demon are going for a dip underwater there in the meantime, coming back up, making sure it gets that Sigil Flame dot as to hold aggro on these mobs. They pull some of that first trash in Naraxis's room, and will be DPSing a lot of this down prior to doing what I would assume to be a larger pull with the rest of the trash before the 3rd boss.
Yep, and making sure as you're having to deal with that Grub Master coming out, he will spawn little grubs that will be casting a little Metamorphosis. Very important to make sure that you're getting a stun out or a disorient effect to be able to interrupt that cast. You're not able to just kick it orbally like you would with others. You really need to make sure you get that taken care of very rapidly. And of course, if they do transform, a lurker will spawn and just makes it so inconvenient to deal with and deals tons of damage.
So they do well to clean up that trash. Now they're heading over, Sky stepping, of course, to quickly pull up all the rest of this trash. We do see the 3rd boss ominously pop up in the background. Free MARSY now dealing with the exact same trash pool, but of course they have the trash percentage advantage in the meantime right now. So, but there is a bit of pressure once again with the death differential between the 2 teams, 10 seconds that they'll have to make up for the end of the dungeon, swimmingly for both teams. And we're also seeing on both sides that Bloodlust timer coming up. We have 20 seconds left on Bloodlust for both sides. So it's going to be interesting to see if they opt to use it here on Naraxis or if they opt to save it for the last boss.
That's right, and you're able to see, because they're about to be engaging with this 3rd boss here, they're probably only going to be getting 1 more out of it, and really making sure they're able to kind of get the best advantage that they possibly can here. Trying to get those grubs, of course, spawning in close. That way they're able to just jump on top of them, get them killed very quickly here. Team BTS just having a nice doing a nice job cleaning up all these mobs, but Free MARSY does look like they're catching up.
Free MARSY now pulling Neuraxis, of course, son of Jiraxis, over on the side. Actually, I'm just kidding. They look nothing alike. Neuraxis now being pulled on the side. Now, we do have to watch out on this fight. It is stationary, of course. You can't drag this boss around, so the tank does need to be planted in front there, and of course the melee as well. But that is difficult to do for them because we do get these kind of the worshippers that spawn in the background, excuse me, the devouts that spawn in the background. They jump down off the balcony, and they do need to be killed because if Neuraxis consumes one of them or consumes the tank with the chains debuff that we'll see later, she will gain a 50% damage buff for the remainder of the fight. Oftentimes you can target these mobs before they're even jumping down in the first place, but that 50% buff adds a lot of extra damage, and you can see, Jack, of course, you know, there's already a ton of splash damage on the group for the healer to deal with.
Not to mention, of course, having to deal with the Grievous that's coming out. You will be having, of course, all the poisons that are hitting the entire group, as you're seeing right here for Free MARSY, and of course the little spew spawns that are coming out that will also help slow those devouts. So great positioning here on the side of Air to be making sure that he's positioning his Spooge. That way they'll be able to get the devout jumping right on top of it. And it also offers a nice slow that the tank that you're seeing in Wrath is able to stand in, fight up against the draw in coming out from Meraxis here.
Absolutely taking a bath in that Spooge indeed as he decides to awe back. Now, it is important for the tank here, once you're done bathing into Spooge, that you do run back and taunt the boss on your way back in to make sure that the boss doesn't melee one of the other nearby players in the meantime. Bit of low dip health in Free MARSY side, nothing that Zerace can't handle in the meantime. Team BTS having an advantage with that Vengeance Demon. Of course, that mobility is very nice to get back in and out, of course, for the chains, although they do opt to use some of that slowing area. Jack will never say Spooge on stream again. Both teams quite close as well. I mean, only 5% differential between these two teams, and Free MARSY's dominance in 17% worth of trash has now been closed down. They're not as ahead anymore. They're gonna, like, I mean, BTS will have to deal with some extra trash downstairs for sure once they get there, but the gap is not big, and don't forget, there's, once again, 10-second differential for deaths.
That's right, and one of the scary things that you're seeing here with Zerace, he's just kind of being put onto that back foot as he's waiting to get his Beacon of Virtue back off cooldown. It looks like a little bit of, maybe a little bit of mistiming there as you're seeing so much in the group getting 3, 4, 5 stacks of Grievous while also having to just heal up everybody through it. So it's one of the things, that one of the big challenges you have to watch out for is making sure that you're able to play aggressively enough to make sure everyone's staying topped off, but also being able to pump out any damage. So, you know, playing a lot safer there by Zerace, making sure that nobody's going to be dying there.
All right, so they jump down the rabbit hole there. Now, it's important to know there was actually a 5% differential between the bosses in favor of Free MARSY. Team BTS actually not only closed that gap, but overtook it. They killed Neuraxis first, heading down to what will likely need to be a larger pull to make up for that extra trash percentage, the 9% that they're missing over Free MARSY. Now, there are, of course, those 2 Scorpions in the last boss's room, along with those Quasi-Pelters in the meantime. Now, what we have to worry about is that if you do pull the boss, all of the trash will spawn on, or will run in on top of the boss, so you can't really avoid that happening. There are some trips you can do with Hunters, you know, feign deathing in the meantime, something that we saw at the last MDI. Oftentimes, Team BTS in the meantime working to clean up this trash.
Yeah, but you're seeing there, I mean, Air, just like in Dark Heart Thicket, just like in Maw of Souls, has taken a lot of this responsibility to make sure he's going to be able to deal with those mobs. But you are seeing Retro going down as they are trying to perform that little pull to be making sure they're getting the Scorpion on top of the boss, while also leaving, you know, the second Scorpion pack behind. So it's just very, very dangerous, and they have to watch out for it because there is going to be so much pulsing damage coming out of that Scorpion, and they do need to interrupt that frenzy that happens every so often.
Yeah, Free MARSY definitely opting to pull big and risky here. Probably something they've practiced, but it did cost them another death, unfortunately. They do use that Bloodlust here, of course, with this bigger pull. Team BTS has the Bloodlust available as well. We'll see it in a moment from them. Similar pull, death right off the boss.
And a similar death.
Retro Fresh going down for Free MARSY and Big Fresh going down for Team BTS, but it looks like it's going to be a full team wipe coming in here. Just a really, really sloppy man pulled in front of Dark Gruul from Team BTS. It's going to be a full wipe. That's going to cost them a ton of time. The run back is all the way back at the second boss's room as the checkpoint in Ulurog's room. While in the meantime, Dark Gruul is now stabilized. Nonetheless, they had a death, but stabilized for Free MARSY as they chisel through Dark Gruul's. Now that we're kind of focusing on Dark Gruul here in a more calm setting without the rest of the trash, we can opt to discuss, of course, the full screen meme coming in favor of Free MARSY. We can discuss some of the mechanics. Now, we do have that giant that spawns, which you want to walk through, grip, punt, whatever may you, through that crystal wall that's just spawned on the side there. If you do that, you will be stunned for, I believe, 10 seconds and take 100% increased damage during that time. Good time to BS it down. Good grip there. Indeed, by Wrath for that giant melts immediately. Dark Gruul will also do a punt on the tank, and afterwards a huge molten hit. If you fail to have active mitigation up for that hit, you will get punted very far and take increased damage. And Jack, of course, lastly, the big AoE at 100% energy on Dark Gruul, where you have to hide behind the wall.
That's right, and periodically you will have, of course, 3 crystal spikes coming up at different times before the magma rush comes up. And as you saw, they weren't actually able to kill the sculptor quickly enough before the second set of crystals came up, so the crystal spawned directly on top of the melee party there, and it instantly was exploded by the sculptor. So they need to make sure that this one stays intact because the magma rush is coming.
This magma rush is magma wave, actually. Sorry. Jack, you're leading me astray here. Magma wave coming in, doing a ton of damage to anybody that is exposed, but fortunately nobody's exposed in the meantime. They safely hide behind the wall. Not as important, and well done by them there that you dragged Dark Gruul close to that wall so that melee have access to damaging Dark Gruul through the wall during that magma wave, else you will just lose a ton of damage in the meantime. So they do well there. Dark Gruul now falling sub 10%. We're going at 5%, and it looks like Free MARSY will be defending their title for now as they take the series 2-1.
Yeah, like you said in the cast, see you later, alligator, is what Free MARSY will be saying to Team BTS as they do take the series 2-1. Crikey, mate, it was close though. We saw a few things. We should get an Australian cast for this because I cannot do the accent whatsoever. But Free MARSY with the 2-1 victory, the defending world champions. It was closer than we expected, but they were able to pull it out on their map choice in Game 3. Now looking in the upper bracket, of course, good stuff by them. And hey, I think it's a race. He was one thing that we saw is like, he said to us, if we're not going to show healing meters, he's going to top the damage meters instead, Jack.
That's right, and that was definitely the goal that we really set out here as we were going through these dungeons. And one of the nicest things was kind of the evolution of how he was just kind of thinking about how he's going to be protecting everybody, keeping everybody in a safe spot. Playing very aggressively in Darkheart Thicket on Xavius did kind of burn them out in the end. But one of the things is when he started correcting that, when he started looking at like Neuraxis, for example, he was able to have that extra time spent getting everybody topped off. And he didn't top the damage meters on Neuraxis, but he kept everybody alive in a very difficult scenario where you're having to deal with the spew that's coming out, the poison damage that is happening, and of course Grievous.
Yeah, and of course, if you're curious as to how he was doing that, you can look at the top left of your screen, see some of the, well, perhaps not anymore, but as he plays in future games, I'm sure we're going to see that Paladin coming out of him. You can have a look at those talents and gear choices that he's using to get that damage. But hey, Game 1's under the books now. We've got that first series out the way, and that was Australia versus Korea. Very different strategies, but Australia and Free MARSY come out on top.
I mean, once again, it was close, really close towards the end, and then there's just that one pull that BTS just didn't manage to do properly in the end. Pulling the Scorpions along with Dark Gruul at the end, and it just didn't work in their favor. I mean, that's a really dangerous pull. Jack and I talk about it all the time. The Scorpions do a lot of splash damage to the group, so they just didn't set up well. They had one drop, they had two drop, and at the point they had to call the wipe. And as soon as that wipe happens, and they failed the beacon on top of it, I mean, it's just the run back is immense. You start all the way back at Ularog's room where the boss would hide the ball under the cup, and it's a huge run back at that point. So they were just praying that Free MARSY, dips, has a wipe, but Aussie, oi, 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 all the way, and they managed to take the win.
Easy full screen, I think is what he's trying to say here. But I'm actually getting confirmation from our stats guys that the Paladin on Free MARSY did 100 million more damage than the Paladin on Team BTS. That's quite a crazy number.
It goes to show you really, what that extra effort is, spending all your activity time and really taking the extra risks to be, aggressive there. You're seeing, like I said, Xavius, you kind of got burned on it, but the rest of the dungeons there, that constant extra damage that you're able to pump out, and the great fundamentals there was just really what helped seal out the game and boosting up the single target damage. And I kind of think that Free MARSY kind of escaped from this game. This is the first seed versus the 8th seed, but usually you're kind of used to saying like, oh, okay, Skyline D just absolutely running the floor with Fire Fang, right? This is a lot of a closer game to them. So I really want to start seeing, as they're going forward, playing and watching out for those extra little deaths, because they are going to be adding up quite a bit if teams are preparing as well as Team BTS did.
Yep, speaks to a competitive bracket, but that is Game 1 in the books. We do have Free MARSY advancing to the upper bracket semi-finals. We'll see them later today, of course. In fact, we'll see all these teams later today. Double elimination. No one's out of it just yet. Of course, we've got many more games for you today as we continue through this Asia-Pacific bracket. Team Substitute versus Scottish Troopers will be next, but it's the defending world champions that take Game 1. They will advance, and we'll see them later today. This is the ANC MDI. See you later.